Picture this. A brand new Boeing 737 just 2 weeks out of the factory, descending through 16,500 feet over the Gulf of Louisiana. The captain is 29 years old, blind in one eye, and has more flight hours than most pilots twice his age. He's flying a state-of-the-art jetliner with one of the most reliable engines ever built. 45 people on board. New Orleans is 40 miles away. And then, in the span of a single breath, both engines die. So stow your tray tables, fasten your seatbelts, and prepare for some extreme turbulence, because this is Final Boarding Call. Hello, and welcome to Final Boarding Call. I am your disaster-obsessed host, Alice.
And I am the currently deaf Zach. Zach.
Are you saying you're deaf because your headphones aren't working tonight?
Yes. It's a very different experience. I just need you to know that.
I'm so sorry. We can find you other headphones.
No, it's just different.
Okay. Well, before we dive in, quick reminder to our listeners, please rate, review, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. And support our merch store, which is on our website, so that we can afford to buy Zach a new pair of headphones.
Okay. If we sold 76 t-shirts, we could afford a set of new headphones.
In this economy? Okay, sources. The Federal Aviation Administration's Lessons Learned Archive, the National Transportation Safety Board's Brief of Incident. You know there's a mayday or disaster on this one, and it is phenomenal. And then I actually found a long-form interview with the captain himself, which is really, really cool. So anyway, the full source list, you know, guys, it's in the show notes. Go find it.
I'm just already struggling. I thought pilots had to have perfect vision, and they've got a pilot blind in one eye.
He's blind in one eye. We're going to talk about him. It's a sunny Tuesday morning, May 24th, 1988, at Comalapa International Airport in San Salvador, El Salvador.
San Salvador.
I know.
El Salvador.
El Salvador. El Salvador in 1988 is a country at war with itself. The Civil War has been raging for 8 years. Death squads operate in the cities. Guerrilla units control parts of the countryside. American military advisors are everywhere. The capital, San Salvador, is the kind of place where a normal Tuesday includes a shootout 3 blocks from the cathedral and a bombing at a bus stop, and people still go to work. Because what else are they going to do?
Not go to work.
It's been going on for 8 years. And in the middle of all of that, there is TACA International Airlines. It's family-owned, and it's headquartered in San Salvador, flying a small fleet of jets between Central America and the United States. TACA is the lifeline for business people, for Salvadoran families and relatives in the States, for tourists, and for the diplomats and aid workers, and journalists who need to get in and out. And this particular morning, TACA Flight 110 is leaving San Salvador for New Orleans, with a quick stopover in Belize City. The aircraft is a Boeing 737-300. It is brand new. The airline took delivery of it 2 weeks ago.
That does sound like the definition of brand new.
It's got that new plane smell.
Is that just less vomit? Or
Here is a detail that's going to matter later. Before TACA took delivery, this airplane had been sitting in the desert for about 6 months. It was completed, but it was unsold, and it was parked in dry storage waiting for a buyer. So the aircraft was technically new, but parts of it had been baking under the sun for half a year, including the main battery.
Oh, okay.
In fact, just one day before our story takes place, this same crew tried to fly this same aircraft on this same route. They got everyone on board, started the auxiliary power unit, tried to crank the engines, and the engines wouldn't start. So the airplane simply refused to come to life, and eventually they gave up. They canceled the flight. The maintenance team came in, diagnosed a dead battery. 6 months in the desert had killed it, and they replaced it with a fresh one. The crew went back to the hotel. The next morning, the morning of our story, the airplane starts right up.
Oh, today's a great day.
Yay!
Or something.
The paint is so fresh that the crew is genuinely worried about scratching it. Can you imagine?
I can't, because every time I see a brand new paint job, like the ones that my dad has done in the garage, I immediately just put like one little scratch somewhere that you can't see it.
Zachary. If someone did that with your stuff, you'd be mad.
I did it with my stuff. You're supposed to do that because you get the first scratch out of the way. Now it's not perfect anymore, but you put it somewhere real inconspicuous. Yeah, it makes a little bit of sense, doesn't it?
The 737-300 is the latest version of what is already the most successful airliner in the world. It is powered by a new engine design, and the name of the engine doesn't really matter except to say that it has a reputation in aviation.
As the workhorse? So what I'm going to hear? A lot of workhorses in this industry.
Tens of thousands of them will eventually be built. They power Boeing 737s and Airbus A320s and military aircraft, and they almost never fail.
Almost.
Almost. In the cockpit, we have 4 pilots. It's crowded up in there. The captain is Carlos Dardono. He is 29 years old, and Carlos Dardono is going to make decisions over the next 2 hours that almost no other pilot on Earth could have made. And to understand why, we have to understand the man. So Dardono was a 3rd-generation pilot. His grandfather flew. His father flew. And by the time he was a teenager,
the pressure was there and he had to fly.
No, listening to interviews with him, he loved flying and he loved planes.
Well, that's good. There's only 2 ways that generational stuff can go. You either feel pressured into it and it was never really your passion, or you're like, I was born for this.
He was born for this. So his father managed a cotton plantation in El Salvador, and on the weekends, Carlos would fly him to the farm, sitting on his father's lap in the cockpit, hands on the controls. He had 350 flight hours before he graduated high school.
Wow.
I know. So the Federal Aviation Administration in the United States requires 1,500 hours to become an airline pilot. And most people don't hit that number until their late 20s. And he had 350 by the time he was old enough to vote. So when he went to the U.S. for formal commercial pilot training, the school basically didn't know what to do with him.
Like, but you already fly more than any of us.
He earned his commercial pilot rating in 10 hours of training.
Don't love that.
The standard is around 250. But he knew how to fly. He literally walked in and they were like giving him all the tests and the things. And he's just like, look, guys,
I've been doing this longer than you.
He earned his twin engine rating in 6 hours. 6 hours. He was not just qualified. He had been speaking the language of flight since he was a child. Other pilots described flying as something they learned, and Dardono described it as something he wore. Years later, he would tell an interviewer that when he flies, he doesn't feel like he's operating a machine. He feels like he is the machine. So by the time he stepped into the cockpit of Flight 110, he had logged more than 13,000 flight hours. 11,000 of those were as the captain in charge. But there was something else about him, and you may have caught this in the intro, Zach. But in 1982, 6 years before this flight, when he was only 23 years old, he worked as an air taxi pilot in El Salvador, flying small planes between rural airstrips during the Civil War. And on one of these flights, he was caught in crossfire between guerrillas and government forces. And a bullet went through his face.
That's unfortunate.
It blew up against his cheekbone. He could put his finger through the wound on his face. And it cost him his left eye. But this is the craziest story.
But he had 2010 in the other eye, and it just worked out perfect.
No, stop it, Zachary. No. So when this incident happened, he loaded all of his passengers back onto this plane, and he actually flew it 20 minutes back to an airport.
Oh, wow.
After getting shot in the face. That's insane. So, there's one of the passengers, this is an insane quote, one of the passengers of this flight where he got shot in the face, looked at him and told him, quote, "You are not going to make it." And he demanded that Dardano land the plane immediately. And Dardano's response was, "Easy, I'm doing okay. Relax, we're 5 minutes away from the airport. We're going to make it."
I feel it in my soul.
Oh my gosh.
It's like, I'm fine. I got this. We're okay.
And he got everyone home. He did it. And after this incident, he refused to stop flying. So flying with one eye is not just a vanity issue. There are real issues that come with being a one-eyed pilot. The main one being depth perception. You know? And you're a pilot. So human beings judge distance using two eyes, comparing the slightly different image
And
each eye
peripherals,
sees.
yeah.
Yeah. With only one eye, you lose that. Your brain has to learn to judge distance using other cues.
Completely different.
The size of objects compared to what you know they should be.
Then what do? Just hold a penny for like 30 hours and stare at it like, I see you.
The way things move past you, the way one object overlaps another. So for most people, that rewiring doesn't happen well enough to fly an airplane. You know.
But he was going to make it happen no matter what.
He spent 3 months in intensive flight testing with the FAA. 3 different doctors, 3 different inspectors, multiple test flights, and they gave him a special waiver confirming that he could fly commercial aircraft despite the loss of his eye.
Good for him.
He is so cool. And by 1986, he had upgraded to captain on the Boeing 737. I mean, this story could end now.
Yeah,
we
that
would
guy
be
was
like,
committed,
wow,
and he
this is
persevered,
amazing.
and he's good to go.
Yeah. Okay, we haven't even started the actual story part of this. This is just the incredible.
Yeah, no bites of meat or
Oh
potatoes
my
yet.
gosh. This guy's just amazing. So next to him is our first officer, who is Dionisio Lopez. 48 years old, 12,000 flight hours. He and Dardano had flown together many times. And in the jump seat behind them is Captain Arturo Soleil, a TACA flight instructor. And he is not there to fly, he is just there to observe the new aircraft. That's all.
Yeah.
And then
okay.
we got a fourth pilot who is deadheading. So he is going back to New Orleans because TACA had recently moved its pilot base from New Orleans to San Salvador, and some of the crew still had apartments in Louisiana. So they literally are commuting home.
Okay.
Crazy. 4 pilots, 1 brand new airplane. And in the cabin, 4 flight attendants are getting the aircraft ready. 38 passengers begin to board. The passenger list is what you'd expect for this sort of route. We've got families going home to visit relatives in the United States. We've got business travelers, a handful of tourists coming back from Belize. And one of these tourists is a young American woman named Lee Burmeister. She had just spent a month in Belize on a trip that did not go the way that she had planned. About halfway through, in a tiny village far from any real medical facility, her appendix ruptured. And she had to have
That's
surgery in this tiny little village hospital. And as she boards the 737, she's still healing. The stitches run vertically up the middle of her stomach. She's in pain, she's exhausted, and she really just wants to get home. So I do need to say a little disclaimer here. I had two sources that were contradicting. One of them said that she was actually in Costa Rica. Hey. So I just want to put that in there. She may have been in Costa Rica. None of these people, not Dardano, not Lopez, not Soleil, not the fourth pilot, and none of the flight attendants have any idea what is waiting for them over the Gulf of Mexico. The flight from Belize City to New Orleans starts beautifully. The sky over the Caribbean is brilliant blue. The brand new 737 climbs to 35,000 feet and it settles in for the cruise. The flight attendants serve drinks, passengers settle in, and Lee Burmeister in her seat tries to find a position where her stitches don't pull. And man, that being uncomfortable like that on a flight sucks. First Officer Lopez gets on the public address system and invites passengers up to see the cockpit.
Oh,
so
we're still doing this.
This is 1988. And passengers were actually allowed to visit the flight deck mid-flight. And this airplane, because it's new and it's shiny.
I was like, check this out, guys. I've got all the same buttons as the other one, but they're clean.
So passengers do come up and they take pictures and they look around. And Lopez is showing off the new automation, the new navigation displays, autopilot. The cockpit is essentially being toured like a brand new car. And then, sometime in the second hour of this flight, the sky changes. So we went from a beautiful sunny day when they left Belize to the blackest sky that some of the passengers have ever seen. Not gray, not even stormy, black. And it is the middle of the day.
Is that because there were Death Eaters around?
Yes. It was terrible. We needed a Patronus. This is the Gulf of Mexico in late May. The Gulf in late spring is one of the most volatile weather environments on the planet. Warm water below, cool air above, massive amounts of moisture. And the Gulf doesn't really do thunderstorms the way the Midwest does. Fronts moving through in lines and you can see them coming for hours. The Gulf does thunderstorms the way some people do bad moods. They appear. They are enormous. They are self-contained, full of energy. And then they're gone. One aviation meteorologist described a fully developed Gulf thunderstorm as carrying the energy of an atomic bomb. And that is not an exaggeration. The amount of water, heat, vertical wind that builds up inside one of these storms is genuinely on that order.
All right, then.
And right in the middle of the descent path between Belize City and New Orleans, on this particular Tuesday afternoon, one of these storms has built itself into the sky. Dardano and Lopez can see it on their weather radar. The display is showing patches of green, indicating light rain, patches of yellow, which is moderate rain, and two distinct red cells, meaning very heavy participation.
I had some heavy participation in that one.
Precipitation to either side of their flight path. And between the two red cells, there's a gap. It's
some
a
green.
quarter of light weather. And that's the path they choose. Now, it is 1988, and weather radar works.
Isn't quite what it is today.
Oy. It works by sending out a pulse of radio waves and listening for the echo bouncing off raindrops.
Mm-hmm.
The more rain it hits, the bigger the echo. Light rain shows up as green, heavy rain shows up as yellow, and then obviously the red. But there is a catch. Weather radar has a maximum sensitivity.
Oh.
Once the rain gets heavy enough to bounce back the strongest possible echo, the radar maxes out. And everything beyond that intensity still shows up as red.
Even though it could have been dark black.
Even worse, Zach, if the radar pulse hits a wall of red so intense that the signal can't get through, and it
still just comes back the way that it's red.
It shows up as clear.
Oh.
So the gap that they are looking at that's black, that shows up as like, oh, great, there's nothing there. It's not a gap at all.
It's just a wall.
It could be the most violent part of the storm, and it is hidden behind a curtain that the radar physically cannot see through. Pilots call this radar shadow, and in 1988, it was a known issue, but it wasn't really widely understood. So we didn't know what to do with it.
Instead, they were like, oh, it's either working or it's not, and we don't know.
Yeah. So as the 737 begins its descent into New Orleans, Dardano takes precautions. He turns on the engine anti-ice systems. Smart. He selects continuous ignition, a setting that keeps a spark constantly firing inside each engine so that if anything disrupts the flame, it relights itself immediately.
Smart.
How cool is that? So these are the standard moves for flying near bad weather. He aims the airplane to be in that gap between the two red cells. And at 30,000 feet, the 737 enters the clouds. Oh boy. The first thing the passengers feel?
Turbulence.
Turbulence.
But like a big jump.
Then the rain, sheets of it hammering against the fuselage. Then a new sound. A sharp, hard, percussive rattle. They're getting hail damage.
Oh.
On this brand new airplane.
Well, it's only a few $1 million. It's fine.
The hail, or ice, really, it's pieces of friggin' crazy ice, is an inch across.
Oh.
And it is slamming into the nose of the aircraft, into the wings, and into the engine intakes. And in the cockpit, Dardano's first thought, his actual first thought by his own admission, is not about the storm. It's about the paint. Damn, my boss is going to kill me when he sees the paint on this brand new airplane.
He'll be more upset if you lose the plane, so just fly it.
That is how routine this feels to him at the moment. A pilot with 13,000 flight hours flying into a Gulf thunderstorm is like, hope it doesn't mess up the paint job. Inside the cabin, the lights flicker.
Oh.
The flight attendants are told to take their seats, and Lee Burmeister grips the armrests, her stitches pulling, and she watches the world outside her window grow white with hail and dark with cloud. And then at 16,500 feet, the lights go out. Not a flicker, out. The cabin goes completely dark. Every screen in the cockpit, black. The engine instruments, the navigation displays, the radio, dead. The only sound is the hail on the fuselage and a deep, profound silence underneath it. The silence of two jet engines that should be making noise, and they are not. Both engines have flamed out. Pilots use the word flame out to describe exactly what it sounds like. The flame inside the engine has gone out like a candle in the wind, and without that flame, there is no combustion, and without combustion, no thrust. both engines on this brand new airplane have lost their flame in the same instant. In the cockpit, Dardano's hands move before his mind has fully processed what's happening. He pushes the throttles forward, nothing, and he pushes them again. Same thing. Because Dardano himself told this story years later, and it's kind of incredible, I wanted to tell you this. So this is what he says. We've lost both engines. And the other captains in the cockpit didn't believe him. Their exact response was, we don't believe you.
Guess he must have been a real funny guy.
Hey, did it. Woof. Dardano pushes the throttles forward again just to prove to the other captains that those suckers are not doing anything.
No, guys, hear this? Me either.
A 43-ton commercial jetliner has become a glider. And in the cabin, the flight attendants notice something even more disturbing than the dark. They also notice that the engines have gone out. So here's what most passengers don't understand about how an airline stays in the air. Airplanes don't fly because the engines push them up. They fly because the wings generate lift. And they generate lift when air flows over them fast enough. So the engines exist to push the airplane forward so that air flows over the wings.
Faster.
And the wings generate lift. So if the engines stop, a plane is not going to just free fall out of the sky. If it was going fast enough at the point where the engine stopped working, you're still going to be able to move. You're just going down while you're moving.
But slowly and somewhat controlled.
And the good news is we're at 16,500 feet. So we've got a little bit of altitude to play with.
And they're how far out at this point?
40 miles before it runs out of altitude. So that's how long they have before we're landing this plane.
Yeah, well.
So New Orleans International Airport is 30 miles away, but the radios are dead. The device that broadcasts the plane's location to air traffic control, the transponder, is also dead. So they don't have directions and they can't talk to anybody. Yeah. So in the New Orleans approach control, TACA Flight 110 has vanished.
Uh-oh.
Completely. Yikes. But here is where the airplane has one tiny gift left to give. The standby horizon, which is a small backup instrument that shows the pilots whether the airplane is level or tilted, is powered by the battery.
The brand new one?
And it's a fresh battery. Aren't they so lucky? So, the standby horizon would have died in the first 30 seconds of the emergency if they still had that old battery. Hooray! With the standby horizon working, he can at least keep the wings level. But that is literally all he has. One small instrument the size of a baseball. Dardano and Lopez start the auxiliary power unit, known as an APU, which is a small backup turbine engine in the tail of the aircraft. And it's supposed to provide emergency electricity when the main engines are not running. It takes 30 seconds to spin up, and that feels like a lifetime when you're flying blind. I can't even imagine. But it does work, and the lights in the cockpit come back on, and the radio crackles to life. When the backup turbine starts, the crew has to choose which of the two hydraulic systems to put on the line. Basically, which set of pumps to power. They each control different parts of the airplane. Isn't this kind of crazy? This is like a real Sophie's Choice situation. Lopez picked one. And he didn't know it then, but he picked the right one. The one that he chose was the system that controls the landing gear. And if he had picked the other one, the landing gear would not have come down later, and this story would have ended very
Completely
differently.
different.
Yep. Whew. Lopez keys the microphone. He miscalls the flight number in his stress, saying 6230 instead of 110, and then he corrects himself. Mayday, mayday, TACA 110. We are in the middle of the storm. We need vectors to the runway. We lost an engine. Both engines, sir. Both engines.
Wait, let me clarify
He read
both.
across both engines. On the ground, the controller takes a beat. New Orleans approach has been working a routine afternoon. Aircraft inbound, aircraft outbound. Now, there's a 737 somewhere in this airspace falling with no engines and 45 people on board. He gives them a vector toward New Orleans International, but he also tells them about Lakefront Airport, which is smaller, but it is closer. Now, Dardano and Lopez try to relight the engines. They follow standard procedure. They use backup turbine to spin the engine up. They introduce fuel. They hit ignition. Both engines light. The cockpit hears the rising whine of turbines come back to life, and for a moment, the crew thinks they've saved it. And then the engines refuse to accelerate past idle. Both of them. The throttles are pushed forward, and the engines respond with nothing. They're spinning. They're burning. You're not getting any thrust.
Oh.
I know. And the temperature gauges are climbing. The exhaust gas temperatures are running past red line limits.
So what you're saying is ice got in to that area and clogged up the engine breathability, basically.
It might be something like that. And Dardano has to make what feels like the most counterintuitive decision.
Turn them off.
He turns both of them off. He shuts them down because a fire
Is worse than coasting.
Oh my God. They don't need that right now. So here we go. We're in glider mode again. In the cabin, the senior flight attendant is called up to the cockpit, and Dardano gives the briefing. We have no engines. We cannot restart them, and we are looking for somewhere to land. Please prepare the cabin. The cabin crew takes their positions. They begin the emergency briefing the way they had practiced it hundreds of times. This is interesting, Zach. These are the instructions they were given. 1, remove your shoes.
That one doesn't make any sense to me.
This one, I believe, and do not quote me on this, but I believe it is so that you do not puncture the emergency slides to get off the plane.
Oh, okay.
Remove your jewelry. Stow your loose items. Move into the brace position when instructed. So that's what they were told to do. Out the window, the storm clouds begin to break. Below the 737, the swamps and canals and the bayous of east of New Orleans come into view. And I just watched The Princess and the Frog with Aria, so this is fresh in my mind. Dardano is looking for a runway. Well, guess what, home slice? There are none. The closest airports are still miles out. It's not going to happen. Below him, there's water, there's marsh, there are highways, and there are levees. The controller on the ground offers him Interstate 10, which is a highway directly below. But Dardano refuses to do that. He looks down and sees cars. He's not about to have a mass casualty event.
You know, not real conducive to the whole point of trying to get the plane down anyway.
Correct. And years earlier, I'm not going to go into this in too much detail, but there was an incident where a plane did land on a highway and it did not go well. So he decides he's going to ditch in a canal. Ditching is what pilots call landing in water. A 737, believe it or not, Zach, isn't designed to land in water.
It doesn't belly flop so goodly.
Is that shocking?
I'm very shocked.
I bet you are. Dardano lines the airplane up with the Gulf Intercoastal Waterway, which is a long straight canal east of New Orleans. He stretches the glide as long as he can. Lopez goes through the ditching checklist. Flight attendants brace themselves. Same with the passengers. And then Lopez sees something. Running parallel to the canal on the right side is a long strip of green. It's a grass levee.
Oh, that's almost perfect.
It's narrow, maybe 100 feet wide, but it ain't water. And Lopez tells Dardano, look right, the levee. And he has 10 seconds to decide. And he turns that airplane. When Dardano, what he does next is a maneuver that almost no commercial pilot ever performs in a real airplane, let alone a real airplane with no engines and 45 people. The levee is to his right. The airplane right now is over the canal, and to get from the canal to the levee, he has to drop altitude fast. He is too high, and he has to simultaneously move sideways. Modern jets don't really do like move sideways real quick.
They don't do the electric slide.
No, they do gentle banking turns that bleed off altitude slowly. Unfortunately, we don't have time for that, so he performs what is referred to as a side slip. And it's a maneuver where you push the rudder one direction and the control stick the other direction, and you're basically drifting.
It's like four-wheel steer.
Kind of is. So you're flying sideways through the air. You're drifting, boo-boo. You're dropping altitude quickly while you are moving laterally. And it is what bush pilots do. It's what aerobatic pilots do. It is not what 737 captains do. And the 737 isn't really designed to do it.
But it can.
But he does it. This dude does it. Unbelievable. So years later, he would tell interviewers that he didn't fight the airplane during the glide. He just kind of felt it. He had been flying since he was a child, and he knew that plane could do it.
Did you just feel it?
Uh-huh. And there's one more thing that should not work, but somehow does. So Dardano is judging his approach to a narrow, rain-soaked strip of grass with one eye. No depth perception.
And no signs.
The brain rewiring that he has done, the substitute cues that he has trained himself to read, the size of the grass blades, the way the levee grows in his windscreen, the angle of the canal beside it, this is what is landing the airplane. The 737 drops through 700 feet, then 500, then 200. The flaps are down, the landing gear is down. The landing gear that came down because he picked the right hydraulic system 30 minutes earlier. The airspeed is at the edge of a stall, and he touches down with one wheel and then the other, and the airplane hits the wet grass, and it stays on the levee. There's no cement wall to crash into, and there's just grass. So it's just brakes and friction and the airplane's own enormous mass slowing it down, and eventually it stops. And all of the passengers look out their window expecting to see runway lights, and instead they see weeds. And they see wingtip a few feet from the water. The passengers begin to applaud. The forward door opens, and the emergency slide begins to deploy, and they do an evacuation. So one of the passengers in her panic runs from the open door and jumps before the slide is fully inflated. Girl. And she's airborne. As the slide is still expanding, she lands on the slide as it's deploying, and she's unharmed, but barely. But it's a good reminder that if you're in an emergency situation, just wait until you are given further instructions. Above them, the storm is breaking up. A small aircraft called by air traffic control to look for the missing 737 flies over and radios back to New Orleans. Woo! On the levee, the passengers stand in the wet grass and they look around. Some of them are crying. They just realized that they have landed in the swamps east of New Orleans, surrounded by water, and several of them say out loud, at least what some of them are thinking, now they have a new fun thing to worry about: alligators. Alligators. Can't catch a break. Captain Carlos Dardano has just made one of the greatest emergency landings in the history of commercial aviation. Within hours, investigators from the NTSB, they're on the levee. And the first question is obvious: how did two engines on a brand new airplane fail simultaneously? The crew gives their account. They were descending, they flew between two red cells, they had rain, they had hail, and then boom, engines out. The first theory is hail damage. Investigators inspect the engines using a borescope, which is a flexible camera that sneaks into the engine and lets you see the turbine blades deep inside. The compressor blades up front look fine. No major impact damage. But inside, the turbines are melted, charred. Pieces of the turbine blades have actually liquefied and re-solidified. The engines are toast. But that's
interesting.
Yeah, but that's the damage from after the engines were restarted and overheated. That is not what made them flame out in the first place. So the question remains, what happened? The engines from TACA 110 are shipped to General Electric's test facility in Ohio. The team there runs the engines through every test in the certification book. They spray water into the inlets at the standard rates, they run the engines at the standard speeds, and the engines pass everything. Nothing makes them flame out. And then someone notices a detail in the flight data recorder. At the moment of flameout, the engines were not running at high power. They were running at idle, meaning the engines were barely producing thrust, just keeping the plane in the air as it descended for landing. The pilots throttled the engines back during descent the same way that you take your foot off the gas when you're going downhill in a car. And the team reruns the test. Same water, same engines, but this time at idle power. And the engines flame out. So the engine had been certified for water ingestion, but only at high power settings.
Because you need the heat to burn off the water, I'm guessing.
Yes. And that's the worst case scenario most engineers had imagined. A plane climbing through a thunderstorm, engines at full thrust, high power. The fan at the front of the engine is spinning so fast that it acts like a centrifuge. It flings water outward, away from the engine core, and out into the air that flows around the outside of the engine, meaning most of the water in that scenario wouldn't even touch the heart of the engine. But at idle, the fan is spinning slowly. And that means that water and hail can actually get into the core. And rain, when it enters a jet engine, behaves like air. It follows the airflow. It gets diffused at the inlet and it gets thrown around by the spinning fan. So that's how rain acts, but hail doesn't do that.
It's too dense.
It has momentum. And it doesn't care where the airflow is trying to push it. It's going to travel in a straight line, and what engineers call ballistic behavior, like a bullet. It goes where it was already going. And at certain fan speeds, at idle power, hail can pass right between the fan blades. The blades are like a Venetian blind on a window. When the blind is closed, no light gets through, but when the blind is open, light streams through the gaps. And hail slipped through those gaps and it got into the engine core. Oh boy. And remember, this was some big hail. It was about the size of a quarter. And it melted and produced a ton of water. More than even the rain that was coming in. And that was it. The flame went out. Because TACA Flight 110 was descending into New Orleans at idle power, with the fan blades spinning slowly, that's all it took. It wasn't bad luck, it was physics. The engine had a hole in it that nobody had thought to even look for. So there you go. The fix took years to fully implement, but it was implemented. The engine manufacturer redesigned the nose cone.
What was it before that? Just flat?
So they changed it from a simple cone to a stretched out, more elliptical shape that flung hail outward, away from the core, before it could even reach the fan blades. They added more small vents inside the engine to drain water before it could flood the combustion chamber. How cool is that? The FAA issued a series of official orders called airworthiness directives that forced every airline operating these engines to make the changes. And by 1998, 10 years after TACA 110, the rules for testing engines against rain and hail had been completely overhauled. Every modern jet engine has been certified under standards written because of what happened on this flight.
And that probably means that they have to have tight enough gaps on the outer turbine that water and hail aren't getting through even at idle.
Yeah, big time. And the other lesson was about weather radar. The radar shadow that hit the heart of the storm became a training case. Crews today are explicitly taught that an apparent gap between two red cells might not be a gap. The training that exists now didn't exist then. And here's kind of the fun finale of this one, Zach. Within hours of the landing, engineers from Boeing arrived on the levee to figure out what to do with a perfectly intact 737 that was sitting on swampland. The options were grim. They could disassemble it, cut off the wings, separate the fuselage, truck it out in pieces. That would damage the airframe and it would take weeks. Or they could fly it.
How are they going to get enough speed from there?
This is so insane. The levee that they landed on was the grounds of NASA's Michoud Assembly Facility, which is the place where NASA builds out parts of the space shuttle. And running through Michoud was something called Saturn Boulevard. And it was technically a road, but underneath the asphalt, it was actually a paved runway from World War II, where the Army Air Forces had once operated training aircraft. It was just over a mile long, it was straight, and it was wide enough for a 737.
Oh,
So a team of Boeing mechanics arrived on the levee, and they performed an engine swap just in the middle of this. They're just like, great, let's do it.
It's one of the options.
Yep. They replaced the destroyed right engine with a new one, trucked in from a maintenance facility, and they overhauled the left engine in place. They drained all but the minimum fuel needed for a short flight to make the airplane as light as possible. Then a Boeing test pilot with no passengers and almost no fuel taxied a Boeing 737-300 out of NASA's Michoud Assembly Facility, lined up on Saturn Boulevard, pushed the throttle forward, and took off. The aircraft lifted off in about a quarter of a mile, and it flew the short hop to New Orleans International Airport for full repairs. And it went back into commercial service, and TACA flew it for years.
Yeah, so the real extent of the damage was just the engines, which,
Yes.
don't get me wrong, is incredibly expensive on those, but for a brand new plane, you're just like, oh, replace these two things and life is good.
And maybe the paint.
Nah. Just let that be a sign of character now.
No, I mean, this plane went on to have a really long life. It was even sold to Southwest Airlines. And it flew domestic routes across the United States. It carried millions of passengers. And none of these people had any idea that they were sitting in a piece of aviation history. It flew for another 28 years. Dardano went back to flying, And he flew for TACA. He flew for the airline that TACA eventually merged into, which is Avianca. And he spent 49 years as a commercial pilot. He flew the 737, the 767, and the Airbus A320. And eventually, he flew as captain on flights where his own son was his first officer.
Okay, that's a special one.
That's pretty cool. On September 1st, 2023, he flew his final commercial flight, an Airbus A320, into San Salvador International Airport. The fire trucks gave him a water cannon salute as he taxied to the gate. The flight crew lined the jet bridge to applaud him as he walked off. No one died on TACA Flight 110. This story has no funerals, and this is what it looks like when the training works. And when you might have a pilot with one eye, but a very good brain. Zach, that is the story for today.
Well, it's a great, happy story.
If you enjoyed this episode, please rate, review, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. You can follow us on social media, but we're not there. And we would love for you to email us at finalboardandcallpodcast@gmail.com. And join us next time when we'll be exploring another transportation disaster story. Until then, remember to stow your tray tables, fasten your seatbelts, and prepare for the unexpected. Because not every trip reaches its final destination. Goodbye.
Goodbye.